The Walker Mysteries, written and created by Andrew White, starring Sally Swift as DCI Charlotte Walker. The bus.
In these times of labels and questions about identity, there is one label I'd be the first to stick on myself, and that is geek. I am totally one of the biggest geeks out there, and I'm proud to be. And I have several topics that I geek out on. Cheese is one of them. Well, British cheeses. Did you know Wensleydale cheese was first made by French Cistercian monks from the Roquefort region who had settled in Wensleydale? Then there's Tizer. Did you know Tizer was launched in 1924 by Fred and Tom Pickup of Pudsey? So it's officially a Yorkshire soft drink. Space is another of my geekdoms. Did you know the International Space Station orbits the Earth approximately 16 times a day? Well, it's actually between 15.5 and 15.9 to be exact. And then there's transport, which basically comes from my dad. Cars, railways. In fact, some of my happiest memories as a kid was standing on the end of a platform on a rain-soaked Doncaster station with a bottle of Tizer and a soggy sandwich watching the Intercity 225s roar in to and from London. And the other topic I geek out on is buses. Did you know that until the Leyland National in the mid-70s, most operators bought the chassis of a bus from a manufacturer like AEC or Daimler and then took them to a bodybuilder like Rowe or Park Royal who built the body and attached it to the chassis? I bet you didn't. So I think I qualify as a top geek. Now, one of my friends is a leading light in the South Yorkshire bus preservation movement who preserve old buses and restore them for future generations to enjoy. The preservationists often run tours and journeys, picking up enthusiasts from the town centre and dropping them off after a lovely run in a vintage bus at a museum. It was on one of these trips to an open day to the Sandtoft Transport Museum just outside Doncaster when one of the passengers enjoying the ride on this particular bus didn't get off at the museum. And there was one very valid reason for that. He was dead. I was the first on the scene, and so I needed to bring my DI, Dean Sheldon, up to speed. What do we know about the body? Well, it's an Alexander R-type body developed in conjunction with the South Yorkshire PTE for fitting to their new standard bus chassis purchased at the time, the Dennis Dominator, fitted, rather uniquely, to the quite thirsty but dependable Rolls-Royce Eagle engine. And did you know versions of the R-type body became Alexander's default design for double-deckers for many years, being fitted to some Leyland Olympians, and I think even to some Volvo Olympians, after Volvo's takeover of the Leyland bus in 1988. You meant the human body, didn't you? The human body was a man, looked to be in his late 60s. His clothes were creased, as if he'd been sitting there for a while, and he had a head of dishevelled white hair. He was sitting right at the back of the bus, which, as you may know, is where the engine was on buses built between the late 60s to the mid-90s, so it's a place enthusiasts often sit to get the full experience of the vehicle. At first glance, and after the fifth and sixth glances by Susie, our pathologist, didn't seem to have any visible cause of death. There wasn't any blood anywhere inside the bus. There weren't any marks visible on his body to suggest he'd been strangled at all, and no obvious signs of being stabbed or such like. I looked for any redness around the mouth, but nothing. I also looked for any blue colourings around the eyes, but again, nothing. So, no obvious signs of trauma on his body, but there was a deep sense of fragility about him, as if he had been ill for some time. We did find out who he was. Michael Turner, who surprisingly had a New South Wales driving licence and some Australian dollars in his wallet. So I'm betting he was an Australian national. Hey, a detective is who I am. Our first step was to interview the passengers on the bus, but that didn't bring up any particular helpful info. They had just sat around him, and no one had noticed anything out of the ordinary. So the next was to talk to the driver. DCI Charlotte Walker, South Yorkshire Police. This is DI Dean Sheldon. Have you recovered? That's good. Look, I wonder if we could ask you a few questions. Thank you. I was wondering how the retarder is on this bus, because I know on some of the Dominators it can tend to be over severe. Interesting. And what about changing gears? Some of them hold on to the gear and then bang into the next, don't they? Excellent. Sorry, excuse me, my DI wants to tell me something. Apparently, I need to ask you questions relating to the events surrounding the dead man and not be asking you questions about the bus.
The driver stopped at the end of his shift at the museum and had approached the man to wake him up and ask him to leave. He didn't respond, but the driver, who was actually a bus driver in real life, said he thought he vaguely recognised him. A trawl through the deceased's social media accounts revealed he used to be a bus driver in South Yorkshire before he and his wife emigrated to Australia about 20 years ago to be closer to their only son and his family. So why was he back in South Yorkshire?
Did you know, D.I. Sheldon, that some of the later Dennis Dominators the South Yorkshire PTE bought were fitted with bodies that looked like Alexander R-type bodies, but were made in fact by rival company East Lancs? Hey? Did my boyfriend know I was such a geek? Of course not. The trick is to not let people know how much of a geek you are until it's too late for them to back out. Well, team, in a turn-up for the book, Susie, our pathologist, has said our deceased had no lacerations, no ligature markings, no gunshot wounds, no stab wounds, and moreover he had nothing unusual in his blood at all. And that the cause of death was a heart attack. Simple as that. Sometimes that just happens, strange as it seems. It means you guys can get back into the Gregory affair, okay? Go on, hop to it. Love heart, anyone? No? Oh well, suit yourself. You're lost.
I stayed up that night to talk to the deceased family in Australia. Telling relatives someone their loved ones had died had never been my favourite part of the job, but apparently I'm good at it. Although I'm not sure anyone could be prepared for telling a family over a Zoom call. I did arrange for local officers from the New South Wales Police Force to be there at the time to offer support. Maybe that's why I'm good at this. His son told me his mum, Michael's wife, died of cancer 6 months ago, and not long after, Michael himself was diagnosed too. He said the one thing his dad wanted to do before he died was to travel back to good old England and take a ride for one last time on a very specific Dennis Dominator bus. The one he used to drive all the time and the one he proposed to his wife on. And that very specific Dennis Dominator bus, yep, you've guessed it, was the very one he died on. To him, it was the perfect way to go. In many ways, we're all geeks at heart. We all have a special passion for something, be that animals, comic books or buses. And if we're lucky, we have someone we have a passion for too. That makes us geeks for love, I guess. Did you know the Dennis Dominator was the largest single type of bus the South Yorkshire PTE ever bought? The order totalled over 322 diesel-powered examples and one special one, the prototype next-generation electric trolleybus version, which, of course, did have a small diesel engine fitted for light shunting type duty.
The Walker Mysteries starred Sally Swift as DCI Charlotte Walker. Written and created by Andrew White. Sound design by Robert Black. Produced and directed by Andrew White. The Walker Mysteries is a Nova production.